Hi, my name's Katya Balen and I am the author of October, which came out in September, confusingly, and The Space We're In, which has just come out in paperback. I'm here today to kind of talk about the kind of children that I represent in my books and that I enjoy writing about. So in The Space We're In, I write about a family who have an autistic child. So Max is 5 and his big brother Frank is 10, and the book is from Frank's perspective. And it's about kind of finding his way to his brother across the universe, because Frank loves his brother, but he sort of does feel like they're on different planets sometimes, and he can be embarrassed and frustrated by Max's kind of high support needs and the fact that his parents have to spend a lot of time helping Max out. And the book is kind of about, after a tragic event, how they manage to kind of get to know each other and support each other and just develop this loving relationship, which is exactly the same as all siblings have with each other. And the reason I wanted to write about a family with an autistic child is because I've been working with autistic people and their families for years, and I never really saw them in books, especially children's books. Their experiences didn't seem to be represented. And I think it's so important, especially when you're a child, that you get to read about families that are like your own. And also, if you don't have an autistic sibling, or you don't know anyone who's autistic, to read outside your own experience in order to kind of improve your empathy and your understanding, because that's how we make the world a more understanding and kinder place. So yeah, in my new book, October, I'm also kind of writing about a child who is kind of on the edges of the typical experience, or very much on the edges of the typical experience in this case, because October grows up in a wood, totally off-grid, in a house that her dad built. It's just her and her dad in the wood, and they hardly ever leave, and she doesn't go to school, and they grow all their own food, and they make all their own electricity, and she's wild, and she loves like scavenging for stories by finding objects in the ground and telling stories about them and climbing trees. And her first friend is a baby owl that she finds and rescues and calls Stig, and she's living what she thinks is her best life, but there's this shadow over them, which is her mother, who left the wildlife and because she couldn't cope, and October didn't want to go with her, and so she doesn't talk to her mother anymore. But things change, and October has to leave the woods and go to London, and it was almost like considering the neurodivergence of a character again, because she's never experienced crowds or more than about 3 people or anything like that, and suddenly she's in the centre of London, and there's the tube, and she's going to school, and she has to get on buses, and there's television, little things that she's never experienced, and it's just this sensory overload for her, and she has to kind of learn how to belong in 2 very different worlds. And the reason I wrote this book is actually my father-in-law does live off-grid in his own woods in a house he built, and he makes all his own electricity, and he grows a lot of his own food. And I did think, like, this is such a strange, sort of unusual, hard, but quite beautiful way of existing and living your life. And what would happen if a child grew up like this? And what would happen if a child had to leave? And that's kind of where the story started for me. So I thought I would read a little bit for you. It's quite near the beginning, and it's just sort of setting the scene for October's relationship with the woman who is my mother, as she calls her. We live in the woods and we are wild. Tonight we howl at the star-dusted sky. We throw our voices and shape them and mix them and mould them like clay. We can stretch our sounds so that they reach the very tops of our tallest trees and down to the secret-filled earth, and so that they tangle in the brambles and skim across the pond, because this world is ours and we are alone. Just us. A pocket of people in a pocket of a world that's as small as a marble. We are tiny and we are everything, and we are wild. We live in the woods. We live in the woods and we are wild. Our house sits in the woods, and it's made from the trees that frame it. They've been chopped and planed and smoothed into a house. And so it's not the same as looking at the twisted reaches of the branches, but I like to be inside the woods. It feels like a secret because we are hidden away and forgotten about in the best way, even though people know we're here. We have to go into the village every year or so and buy the food we can't grow or the clothes we can't make, which is nearly all clothes except for socks, and even those aren't very good when I try. Dad can turn a ball of wool into a foot shape with a click-clack of needles and half an eye on the stove, but I can't manage more than a tangle. We get all the things we need for another year and slip back into the woods while the village forgets us again. The house was built by Dad before I was born. I wasn't born here though, because at the last minute the woman who is my mother said no way, and she was whisked off to the hospital, and she was pushed down corridors that were white and bright and treeless and blank and like nothing she remembered. But then she did remember. She remembered all the things like microwaves and internet and heating that happens at the push of a button and not from the roar of a stove that makes your clothes smell smoky and sweet. She remembered, and when she had her baby wrapped in a white blanket that matched the walls and the sheets and the pillows, she said to Dad that she couldn't go back. She did, for a bit, but she was floating off into the world that fringes ours, and when I was 4 she was gone. In my head I think I remember the day she left, but the memory is like trying to hold water in my cupped hands and it trickles away before my eyes. There are wisps of a woman holding onto my hand, and I feel my whole body being pulled along by the tide of another person, and my legs can't keep up. There's crying, and I know I let out a shriek so loud it pierced the sky and the birds scattered. I wouldn't let her leave with me. I wouldn't leave the woods. When I try and remember her now, it's like she's been sliced out of the memory, and all that's left is a black person-shaped shadow where she should be. Or sometimes she's there, but then her edges fuzz and curl into smoke, and nothing's left. I hate her for leaving the world, and I hate her for leaving us, and I hate her for leaving our perfect little pocket of the world. She writes all the time, but I don't ever read the letters. I don't know why Dad even bothers collecting them from the wooden letterbox at the very edge of the track that leads out onto the whole wide world. She's the only person who ever posts us anything. Once Dad opened one of the letters and laid it out on the kitchen table for me to read, but I scrunched it up and into a scribbled ball and watched it turn into ash in the fire and the inky words fade into embers. When I was 5, she came to the woods and I hid up a tree and didn't come down again until it was night, even when Dad climbed up to try and coax me out. She did it again when I was 7 and then when I was 9, and every time I scrambled into the safety of branches. Dad says she's not too far away and I should see her and see where she lives and talk to her and be her daughter again, but I stop scavenging and climb up to the top of a tree whenever he talks about her, and he doesn't do it so much now. Everything is far away from here, and that's exactly how I want it to stay. There's a word in German that I read about. German has all these strange and magical words that have a million feelings curled up in the letters, like being happy when someone else is sad, or longing to be somewhere where you're not right now. I only get that when we go to the village. My favourite one means forest solitude, and it's the feeling of being alone in the woods and being calm and happy and safe. And she didn't want that. She wanted me to go to school and spend my weekends with her, far away. But then when would I ever be wild and free and climb trees and scavenge for treasure and tell stories by a fire? I don't want her. She's not wild like we are. So that's from October. I hope that you've enjoyed this little video, and if you're writing something, good luck with it. And yeah, it's been really nice being part of book club. Thanks so much. Bye!